If you just look around at the world today, it's hard to shake this feeling that things are, well, speeding up, right? There's this sense of urgency in the air. And the material we're digging into today sees this whole thing not just as some big global event, but as something much more personal. It's a spiritual call, a call to get ready.
So, right off the bat, it hits us with a really direct question. Are you ready? It's a throwback to that old parable of the 10 virgins, you remember? Where the big lesson was that only the ones who were actually prepared got into the wedding feast. It's a pretty stark reminder that being ready is what really counts, maybe even more than just being enthusiastic.
So, what is this call exactly? Well, according to what we're looking at, there's a very specific and, well, urgent message being sent out right now from God to his people. And really, getting a handle on this call is the key to everything else we're about to talk about.
All right, let's really zero in on the words here. Notice, this call isn't just for anybody and everybody. The verse says, "Come out of her, my people." So this is being framed as a direct message for believers, which of course brings up the big question, come out of what? Who is her? What is this city?
And the source is clear. That city is Babylon. But hold on, before you pull up a map, it makes a crucial point. We're not talking about a physical place. This is symbolic. So the real question we need to answer is, what is this spiritual Babylon that we're being told to leave?
Okay, so to get our heads around this, we have to stop thinking of Babylon as a dot on a map. Instead, we need to see it for what the source says it is, a powerful, all-encompassing spiritual system.
The source points us to the book of Revelation, where Babylon is pictured as this grand figure that seduces and deceives all the nations. So a really good way to think about it isn't as a city, but more like the world's default operating system. It's the background programming that's always running. It's attractive, it's controlling, and it's constantly pulling us in with all its promises.
So, what's this operating system running on? What are its core values? Well, it boils down to four main things. First, there's pride. It puts pride way above humility. Then you've got corruption, making it seem normal to cut corners for personal gain. It's also deeply self-centered, putting me at the absolute center of the universe. And the root of it all? A fundamental rebellion against God's authority. And here's a really crucial point. This isn't just some problem out there in the world. No, this system, this whole way of thinking, has quietly crept into every part of our lives. We're talking politics, business, the movies we watch, and here's the kicker, even the church. Now, to really grasp how deep this goes, we've got to trace it back to its roots. And the source makes a fascinating connection here, linking the ancient story of the Tower of Babel to something incredibly modern, the idea of the personal brand. So check this out. It all starts way back in Genesis. The word Babylon itself actually comes from Babel. And if you remember that story, the people weren't building that tower to honor God. Nope, their stated goal was, quote, to make a name for ourselves. That was the whole point, to build up human glory, to centralize their own power. And that spirit, that core motivation, well, that's the exact same engine driving the Babylon system today. And this is where it just clicks. Look at this comparison. Back then, the goal was to make a name for ourselves. Today, it's all about clicks, followers, and influence. The motivation then was to avoid being scattered, to build a monument to their own power. Today, it's about building a personal platform. It's the same game, just a different century. The core issue is exactly the same, shifting the spotlight from God onto ourselves. So this naturally leads to a pretty challenging question for us to think about. Where do we actually see this system at play today? In our culture, and maybe even a little closer to home. The source lays out some really pointed examples. Think about it. It's that temptation to bend our values just to get a few more views or likes online. It's when a church gets more fired up about its growth metrics than about teaching the truth. It's when our faith slowly becomes less about God and more of a self-help program for our own happiness. And it's definitely at work when we just assume that being successful and influential automatically means God is blessing us. Okay, wow. Seeing those examples really makes this hit home, doesn't it? So if that's the diagnosis, what's the cure? What's the prescription? How do we actually start leaving Babylon? The source is really clear here. This call to come out is not about packing your bags and heading for the hills. It's about a deep, internal shift in the way we live our lives.
And this right here is the absolute heart of it. Coming out of Babylon isn't about becoming a hermit. It's about what the source calls a transfer of sovereignty. It's about who's in charge. It's a shift from a life run by my will, my plans, my kingdom, to a life where we can honestly say, okay, God, your will be done.
So how do we do that, practically speaking? Well, the good news is it's not some big mystery. The source gives us 3 simple daily actions we can take to start pulling away from the system. So let's walk through them.
All right, step 1 is all about surrendering that sovereignty. And the metaphor here is just perfect. Think of your life as a car. The big question is, who's in the driver's seat? Are you still behind the wheel, maybe with God in the passenger seat giving directions? Or have you actually slid over and handed him the keys?
And the practical action for this step is so simple, but so powerful. It's about starting every single day with a prayer of surrender. Literally saying the words, Lord, today I'm giving you the steering wheel. Not my will, but yours. Just that one intentional act every morning, that's the first real step out. Okay, step 2 is all about discernment. We are just swimming in a sea of messages from the Babylon system every single day. The challenge then is to learn how to tune out all that static and find God's frequency in the middle of all the noise. So we're encouraged to do a little audit of the information we're consuming. Just look at this chart. If we're being honest, how much of our day is tuned into the world's frequency, social media, the news, entertainment, which often pushes comparison and self-focus, and how much is tuned into God's word, which promotes humility and service? The action here is to just take stock of that and maybe start making some conscious choices to rebalance the inputs. And finally, step 3. This is where the rubber meets the road. Because coming out of Babylon isn't just about what you think, it's about what you do. Every single time you choose a small, selfless act, serving someone when you don't have to, forgiving someone who doesn't deserve it, just admitting you were wrong, you are literally taking a physical step out of Babylon's self-centered territory. And that really brings us to the final powerful takeaway here. We hear this big word, revival, and it can sound like this huge, distant thing. But what the source is telling us is that it doesn't start with some giant movement out there. It starts with a simple choice, a choice that you make. It starts with you. So we end right where we started, with a question. Look, the times we're living in are forcing a choice. Are we building the kingdom of self, which is Babylon's whole project, or are we building God's kingdom? This call to come out isn't something for the distant future. It's for right here, right now. So, today, what's your choice?